Biswas. He's joined us, and he is the guru when it comes to agritech in Africa. So, Biswas, you just want to introduce yourself, and I'll let you do the hosting.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to participate in this auspicious event, especially at the time when COVID is on our laurels. Thank you so much. I'm an ecosystem strategy advisor. I advise with the African European Fellowship, which is based in Germany. So that's my short and brief.
Okay, Biswas, are you gonna be hosting the panel? You're on mute.
My apologies for getting in late. Sorry for that. Thato, Keitumetse, Matthew, you're welcome. Thank you so much for the wonderful introductions that you have said about Matthew. I've heard of your business models. Thato, I've heard of your farming efforts, and Keitumetse, all the ways that you are doing in South Africa and beyond. If I may start, what is the African opportunity in its broadest sense? How are we seeing this? How does this opportunity stack up with the African resources and capabilities which we have so far on the continent? If I may start with you, Thato. Thato, are you there?
Hi. You were just breaking up. I don't know if you can repeat the question for me.
Okay, I was saying, what is the broadest opportunity in Africa? And does Africa has the existing resources and the capabilities already before we leap into this agricultural technology sphere?
Okay. I think what makes Africa unique is obviously it's a developing country. So we're really dependent on, the economy in terms of what is happening in, the urban spaces, but also we also have issues with the rural spaces. And that's where, in the agricultural sense, that's where we really need to be making sure there's investments in terms of technology, is there enough cell, reception? Because those things, even like road networks, electricity, those are the things that inhibit businesses from growth. Being able to access these basic public goods is quite necessary. So if you'll see that in areas where there is those basic public goods, then you find that there is that link between the rural and urban space, and people, specifically farmers, can make more from their output. And I think in Africa, yes, we have, political challenges in terms of how we address specific policies. We have great policies in South Africa, but they're not being implemented, because when we look at the structure, it's really about, do we have the right capacity within governments to actually foresee these policies? So we have really good rhetoric around agriculture. But then when you're going on the ground, it's really private sector that is driving this space, because private sectors, obviously profiteering from making money from solving people's issues. And that's where that line to say that, are people really accepting technology? There, when you start speaking to some workers, they'll tell you, I don't want to use this machine because it takes a job away from me. And then you've got a farmer who's saying, I need to optimize because I need to make more money. So there is that area that we need to address social challenges. We need to address those issues. So it's quite complex, but you find that things that we've been able to solve, transacting on your cell phone, things like M-Pesa, EcoCash are really helping areas in Kenya and Zimbabwe to be able to transact in the rural space, and then you start seeing things coming out, seeing people using, SIM chips to tag their animals. And so people, there is that progress. Even the drone technology is very much used in that space. So the issue comes in to say that, how do we create more solutions that are relevant to the people on the ground? And I think there is people that are coming up with good ideas. It's the issue of how do you disseminate them to make sure that people have access to these innovations, because there's a wealth of knowledge, but when you get on the ground, people just don't know, because it's quite an isolating environment, you know, being involved in your farmer, you're in your business, you're in there every day. You don't have time to be on, you know, the internet all the time or catching up on, you know, people just want to farm. So it's very important that this next generation that we bring up, that we expose them to Agritech, and the pinnacle points lie in, you know, from the STEM education system, from when they enter the schools, you know, that they've got an understanding of basic science, maths, technology. And then when they start growing up, you need to give them exposure to industry. So they should be able to understand different industries, understand how things are organized. So when they make choices of what they want to study, they can be able to, you know, choose the right things.
Yes. Talking about the solutions that are there already in the public sector, if I may come to you, Keitu, how do you see the African governments, corporations, and startups? Are they already riding this wave of agricultural technology in your side, in your perspective?
I think they probably are, but not enough. I was reading on a study the other day that they did, and it showed that in the agricultural space across Africa, only 23% of the youth involved in that space are using technology or technology advanced solutions in their farms or in their agricultural products. So I really think there aren't enough, there isn't enough initiatives to introduce and to start training the youth and exposing the youth about these available agricultural products. And I think what Matthew and Thato are doing in terms of solutions that they're building is quite great, because before we even build the solutions, we need to start training the people of the available solutions that are there now. Because I think a lot of the guys, either it's, I don't know, it's a little bit of a mix between lack of knowledge of how and why we use technology in the agri system, and also they just don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. So I think it becomes very important to go back to the building blocks where we introduce the people, teach the people about agri-tech. Because if you are on your farm every day, all day, you don't know better. And if someone doesn't introduce you and train you on the availability of systems that are going to help you in becoming more effective and in using effective ways of producing your products and getting your products out to market, then you're also not going to be on the winning side. So I think in this space, back to Thato's point, we need to go back to the drawing board right at the beginning, where we educate the people about the availability of solutions that are currently there, and also encourage people to come up with solutions that with more solutions based on the problems that we are facing in the sector.
Okay, that's great. Talking about the solutions that are available there, especially for the youth in Africa and across the region. When we talk of this agricultural technology, we often talk of it on the market side, but not necessarily on the innovation side. How do you see, if I may come to you, Matthew, do we have the scientific know-how, the research tools, and the infrastructure to sustain these innovations? You just pointed out in your three-layered business model that you talk of data and ecosystem, but do we have the research, the know-how that can sustain these innovations on the other end, besides the marketing side of it?
Yeah, I think we do. I think we do have it. I think it may not necessarily be in the agri industry. You know, we've built our own team. So we've kind of like hired our own developers. We've got a team of 6 developers. And I think it is difficult to attract good talent into the industry. You know, there's a lot of competition with the likes of Amazon coming in. There's competition with other tech companies. So even though I think we do have the technical expertise, as a startup, it's hard to compete in the market where, you know, this is a very highly priced resource. So I think it's important for, you know, I think one thing that's worked for us is that we've had good backing. We've been quite blessed to have, you know, good investors come on board. We've been able to, I think, build a good story around Kula. And, you know, in my view, it's always it's always a bit of a process. So you always will have early adopters who come in from both an investor perspective, but even from the tech perspective. People, early adopters willing to take a risk on you. And I think even in terms of farmers, when we're talking about how do we get more farmers to adopt it, in my opinion, you just have to start with the early adopters, and over time, you just have to allow it to snowball and allow that word of mouth to spread. I think our sort of biggest win has sort of been the word of mouth. When one person has a good experience, they kind of relate that to the next person, and we will never sort of shove it down people's throats to say you have to use this technology that's going to help your farm. You kind of have to build that snowball over time. And the interesting thing about agriculture is that it's a very seasonal business. So even if you think of it from a marketing perspective, it will take a farmer 3 seasons to make a decision because it's a high risk. If they make a mistake, that's the crop loss for the season. So if you're really going to be in the game, you have to realize that, you have to put in the time, you have to go for multiple seasons. If you make a mistake this season, you have to wait all the way to the next season to be able to fix that mistake and try again. And it's the same with the farmers on the call. If you plant the wrong seed and you get the wrong product coming out, you have to wait to the next season to start again. And in tech, we are used to this fast-paced tech environment, but we have to be patient with the market, go through the seasons, and we have to be in it for the long run.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Keitu, if I might come back to you, recently the United States Patent Office denied that AI cannot be an inventor, which means as powerful as AI can be and to create other artificial intelligence programs, we still rely on that human hand. We still need those bright minds in the room. We still need the inventions of the audience that are listening right now. Coming to Africa, you talked about the productive age being unemployed. So where does the human labor fit into this agrotech economy?
I missed you there a bit, but I think I got your question in between, and let me answer that. I'm going to go back to what Matthew was saying about the innovation space and agri being quite risky and innovation, and we need to marry the two. And here's the reality in South Africa, especially it's a huge pain point in the agricultural space, right? Access to capital and access to funding. And a lot of the things, and that's also one of the things that really make the youth, or that make agriculture become very unattractive to the youth and people genuinely in that are unemployed, because it's seen as quite a dirty job. You don't have access to funding because no one wants to fund primary agri products or agri projects. So how do we do it? So I really think it's quite important at this point to marry innovation, because there's quite a lot of funding and quite a lot of excitement around the innovation space. And I've worked on a project with a company called MIC, where we were funding, they launched 155 to fund SMEs and youth businesses. But the reality is that we weren't funding primary agricultural products, but we'll fund an innovative product that goes into an agri space, or that goes into assisting and building a sustainable agricultural product. And once we marry the two, and it comes back to what Thato and Matthew were saying in terms of the training and getting and letting people knowing about the systems that are out there. And we also need training and learnings on agri not being that dirty space that everyone thinks it is. Because what technology has done for the youth and what technology has done in the environment is that it's made it quite an unattractive one. It's like mining back in the days, when no one wanted to mine because it was seen as one of those jobs that were quite unattractive and quite dirty. But with the use of innovative systems, I think in agriculture, and with the use of technology in agriculture, I think we can really do quite a lot in marrying the two, and also in promoting youth to come into it, so that, because that is a space that can really employ a lot of people across the country and across the continent. So
yes,
let
sure.
me leave it there. Yeah.
Yeah, talking about marrying the two between innovation, the excitement about innovation, and what we already on the ground. Agritech usually comes at the intersection of good policy, administration, and innovation. But to some extent, some policies in Africa, African nation states are quite uncertain, if I may say, if I may quote Thato well, they are quite uncertain. What is the new role of the government so that this benefit reaches the small scale, even the most rural of farmers, which Thato said about? What kind of federal policies can we nurture so that we have high value creation and exploitation at the same time, especially in this agricultural technology side?
I think for us is outside of what the government can do, we in the space need to look at what is currently sitting in the policies and what's currently being implemented. And with organizations like these, we can assist each other to re-look at the policy and go and influence a policy change, because I don't think, maybe in certain countries it might be more difficult than others, but we can certainly influence policy change, because if we are the people on the ground, the people in government that come up with the policy are not the people on the ground. They come up with policy based on what they know. So if things on the ground are changing, it's our responsibility as the people on the ground, as the entrepreneurs, as the people in the agri sector, as the farmers, to say this is what's happening on the ground, and this is how we would like the policy to change to suit our needs and to suit what's currently happening. And then we can take it from there. I think we have to take the first step before anyone, because I really don't think, no offense to anybody, but I don't think the government is going to do anything to change policies or try and change things try and change the policy to make it better for the farmer if they don't know what is going on in the farmers on the farms, or if they don't know what's going on with the entrepreneur. So we ourselves need to be the ones that start the conversations on the policy changes. And it will be a difficult one, but we have to start somewhere. And like Thato said, some of us need to be the ones that are implementing the policies, because sometimes there are countries that have good policies in place, but the implementers of the policies are not doing it as they're supposed to be. So some of us need to come out of our farm and go and take on positions to implement the policy, which is the sad reality of it, right? So I think it's a little bit of a balance of both. So we need to be active in trying to change the policy, and also become very active in implementing the policy for the benefit of farmer on the ground.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm sure that when you talk of farmers coming in, an individual person coming in, so that we understand the implementation of this policy, are the human or the consumers in the hands of changing that policy? What kind of tools are at our hands that we can use from a regulatory point of view? Without necessarily saying the government has all the responsibility, what are the necessary tools that every individual farmer, every consumer should start implementing now? If I may come to you, Thato.
I think with the consumer, there is still a lot of education in terms of the consumer at the end of the day has the buying power. And, there's many causes. People want to eat organic, they have a choice. Well, if they can afford it. So it all goes down to what is people need to eat. They're not really going to say, we're not going to choose a specific product because it's not adhering to, promoting emerging farmers. It's all about supply and demand in terms of that. And in terms of us, the farmers, I think what Keitumetse touched on just now, to say that it's actually our responsibility to enter these spaces. I've met amazing women and young men that have, gone into, represent farmers and different platforms. I've worked on, UN platforms, FAO, I've worked with the presidency. And it's really, besides being a farmer, now you have to enter these spaces, and you need to be able to share your experiences so people in these positions of power can understand your perspective, but also, speak to them at a level where they see what they can prioritize. And yes, it's difficult because it's a political space. And at the end of the day, yes, it's a political space. And then in terms of the administration side, when you look at it, to say at local government level, we actually lacking the right skills to implement some of these policies. So you see a lot of budgets not being used by the end of the year, and they get returned back to the fiscus because they're unable to implement budgets, or things are under investigation. So I think that I believe the private sector are solely going to be the ones who are going to be the drivers of agri-tech space, because that's where the activity is happening. People are making transactions, people are going through businesses, people are going to schools trying to learn.
Okay, I think we just lost Thato, yeah. But if I heard her correctly, she's mentioned something important in terms of how we are going to tune in current existing systems. Matthew, if I may come to you, with this whole revolution of big startups such as Hello Tractor in the West African, Good Nature, Apollo Agriculture, they're all compressing value chains. For example, the food comes from the farm, going straight into a person's household without going to the traditional market, which is governed by the government, and there are no certification marks. You talked about certifications around the farming food itself. And also, we see that loans are becoming fast processed. You can just go around the farm, and a GPS can walk around and then you get an instant loan. So, to what extent do you see public interest being protected by such practices? Because if the food is bad from the farm, it goes directly into a person's household. How will you protect the interests of the consumers in the end?
Yeah, very, very interesting question. I think maybe my first comment will just be on the fact that Africa has very different markets. So I think every sort of African country should be taking a slightly different approach to their innovation. What works for us as Kula, we would definitely have to adapt it a lot to be able to fit into Kenya or another country that we go to. For example, Twiga Foods in Kenya is probably the biggest or best example of sort of trying to supply the informal markets effectively. And that's just because there are no municipal markets in Kenya. There are no big aggregators in Kenya. Whereas in South Africa, we have a lot of aggregators. We have a very formalized market. Our infrastructure, even though maybe it's not the best in some areas, but it's much better than the rest of the continent. So the solution that we've developed in South Africa is possibly quite different than the solution that we would develop in another country. So specifically in South Africa, we focused a lot more on sort of retail and big wholesale sort of buying from farmers. That's where we focused, mainly because we don't really want to play or compete in certain spaces. Possibly in Kenya, for example, you could leapfrog and go directly to the consumer, and that could potentially work well for you. In terms of health and safety, it's a tricky one. I think in South Africa, we have got quite strict regulation, and because it's quite formalized, I think consumers are more protected. Whereas possibly around the continent, there would have to be a different solution. I know, for example, there's something in South Africa, I'm not sure how big it's gotten as yet, but there's something called PGS, which is called Participatory Guarantee System, which is kind of, you get different stakeholders to all give a rubber stamp, and it's kind of like a more scalable way of certifying that this farm is indeed following good practice. I think it's more of an organic certification, but those are the kind of things that could possibly pop up when serving those specific needs. So I think for me, and also just to almost add on to your last question, for me, it's really about designing for the customer. We can talk about politics and regulation and policies and whatever. I'm no expert on it. But one thing I know is that the customer will always make the choice, and that customer demand will eventually inform where the market goes. So I think even in our case, we don't necessarily focus a lot on policy and what the government is saying and trying to follow them. I think as entrepreneurs, you have to kind of forge your own path and do what you think is right, and not necessarily follow sort of where the policy is going. But for me, it's really about designing for the customer. And if the customer has a really great experience, and in our case, we're looking at like a wholesale or retail buyer, in their specific case, their biggest pain point is just the fact that there's a lot of admin to buy from farmers. That's their biggest pain point. It's very admin intensive, the documentation and all of that kind of stuff. And if you solve their pain farmers, so it's kind of, for me, it's around really what are the pain points of your customer, and if you can solve that, that's how you get the most value out of it.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay, thank you so much for that, Matthew. If I may take in some questions, our audience are reminded to plug in and ask their questions as we are talking, and then we'll address them towards the end. There's a question here, Matthew. How do you get around data issues and therefore digital access in particular context of South Africa? I'm sure the person who asked you is talking about the whole gamut of issues that are around. What's the right farmer data? What is it static? Is it behavioral? Is the format easy to transfer the data? Can the data insights be used from one farmer to the another farmer at a low cost and so on? Do we see data being the next value in terms of in African context?
Yes, so I think there's two interpretations of data. One maybe is just connectivity and how farmers can connect, but secondly, what is the value of the data we're collecting and all that kind of stuff. So I think the biggest sort of reason we started Kula in the first place was they knew very little about the industry. You don't know where the demand is coming from. You don't know what the farmers have. You don't know, if you have a database from government, you don't know if these farmers are still in business. You don't know their track record. So, and even if there's specific companies that have this data, they're using it for their own business and they're not sharing it with the wider sort of community to add value. So that was sort of one of the big reasons why we started Kula, because we wanted to kind of build this map across the continent and possibly across the world where, you can now have transparency. You can now see what's actually happening. You can connect these role players in the most efficient ways possible. And without the data, you're not able to actually connect people efficiently. And I'll make one example. For example, if you're a potato farmer in KZN,
Matthew, just a quick one. Sure. Matthew, all right, you can go ahead. Yeah, just a quick one. We're running out of time.
Oh, okay, just a quick one. Okay, but let me cut this. It's short. I think the data is very important. It's also important to protect the data. So we've had to implement POPI as of what I think was 1st of July. So we do protect personal information, and we give you the choice of what information you want to share. So if you don't want to share all of your information, you can opt in, you can opt out. But at the end of the day, if you do opt in to sharing some of your data, it can open you up to more opportunities. And the way I see it is we can do very targeted sort of support for farmers depending on their profile. So if a farmer specifically has a program and needs financing for inputs, let's try to do very tailored things for different people. Some farmers need, they've just got a contract where they're only getting paid 21 days later. Let's help bridge their cash flow for that specific deal. So everyone needs something different. And I think by leveraging the data on the platform, that's how we can give a lot more tailored solutions.
Okay, thank you, Matthew, for that one. We have so much touched about the benefits of all these technologies that are coming out, but we are sitting on a malnutrition of the children under 5 across Africa. With these emerging technologies such as quantum technologies being used in the preservation and discovery of COVID vaccines, which compute at a faster rate. Coming into the agricultural sector or agricultural sphere, does such technology hold the power to improve crop yields, biospection, or discovery of seed varieties. One example I could point out is the prediction of feta, cattle as part of fifth generation prediction out of quantum technologies, which can sustain a family, a country, and the continent as well. So with all these boutique of technologies, are we sending the signals in the right direction so that we have food security, we are addressing the food security challenge which we are facing so far? If I may start with Thato.
I think we are going in the right direction. I think the issue is that in South Africa, we've got really good research institutions that have, researched seed technology, have done, work with AI as well. I think the issue is the bridge between these research institutions and the farms. There needs to be that partnership. A great example is Wageningen University in the Netherlands. At the university, they have an innovation center where they launched this research into products. So we need more of that, and I think if we can take all of this research that's coming out of the universities and, have a pool of funders, of people who are, venture capitalists funding these ideas, or if it's from government, then I think we would have more technologies that speak to the people's needs. And I think the issue now is the bridge between a commercial farmer and a small scale farmer. A commercial farmer has access to data. He can weigh his cattle. He knows how much nutrition is in his feed. Everything is computerized and it's data based. And if you're not in that space of, using data to make decisions at farm level, it really separates you. And, if these things help you cut down costs, cut down on food waste, which is an important issue in South Africa. And if you're producing the right thing at the right quantities for your client, then, and it's sustainable, I think it's a plus for us in terms of, the growth in the agriculture industry. Then you find on the other spectrum, a small scale farmer who doesn't have access to the information, but using heavy inputs, maybe should, just needs that education in terms of sustainability. So how do you get that information to him? So there is, initiatives that are trying to use smartphones, SMS services to, people can read about these things. So I think that in terms of what people are trying, be it from nonprofit organizations to research, they really are trying to get the word out there. I think what we need to do is, like Keitumetse mentioned, to say, how do we make the industry attractive to young people? This industry can employ people. So if we can get the technology into the hands of young people, if they can farm smarter, if we can get more young people farming in the urban spaces, I've seen rooftop farms in Joburg, people are using containers. So you can see, but the issue is, there isn't that support, and so it's great to see Matthew coming up with apps that can link all of these spaces. And I think the solutions people are coming up now in the next 10, 20 years, they're going to be very big and important in the industry, because these are, as time you're seeing what's happening on the ground, you're getting the data. And data is the most important thing in agriculture. It's the most expensive commodity. And if we can carry on documenting all of these things, and we now have to create this sort of open source platform where the most basic person, and then, we have a debate around data and rights and who has a right to it. Should people pay for the information that comes from your farm? So that already people are having those debates to say, I've farmed this way for so many years. I deserve something from giving my data out. So we need to start these conversations now. So we're building solutions, paving the way for open source platforms that are accessible, through community radio, cell phones. So we just need to make it accessible, whatever space there is. But I strongly believe we're going towards the right direction.
All right, thank you so much, Thato, for that perspective. If I may take into one of the questions here, one person asked it, what are the panelists trying to mitigate the effect of climate change, droughts, and famine on the agriculture via the agricultural technologies? And does Agritech in Africa have the capacity to address such a big issue? With this, of course, in the first 15 years of the century, we had the climate change issue. Right now, we are talking of the United Sustainable Development Goals, which talked about climate action. What real actions, if I may put into perspective one of the questions, what kind of action has to be taken within the climate action itself? Keitu?
Okay, let me jump in there. I think for me, I think the innovations in the agri space have quite a pulling power for the whole sector. And I think while we're in that innovative mood and while we're in that innovative space, part of the Agritech is building technology systems or building systems that are going to help us combat these issues of climate and so forth and so forth. So I think we need to use the pulling power of innovative solutions to combat some of the challenges that we are facing. And once we've done that, we need to also have a system or have means or come up with ways to help small scale farmers to embrace the advanced technologies. Because I think for me, once we've found the solutions and we start embracing them ourselves, I think one of the panelists did say everything is concentrated with the big scale farmers and the corporate farmers. But once we've built those solutions for ourselves and for the big corporates, then we need to start embracing the advanced technologies to the small scale farmers so that everyone can have the benefit of the innovative solutions. Because at this point, it's only a few that are getting the benefits of the tech and agri-tech solutions. So I think for me, the solution is, yes, I think we definitely can we can combat the issues with technology and technological systems. But also, there's a second leg to it. We need to start embracing it throughout all the stakeholders and all the farmers, regardless of size, shape, and color.
Thank you so much to the panelists. We are running out of time. But if I may post one of the last questions, we've talked about agricultural technology and its benefits. Have we ever thought about tying it to the circular economy? We have all these. How do we manage the waste side of it in the circular economy? How do we recycle, remanufacture, and reuse? One example I can use is about how do we nature plantations, remanufacture them, at the same time use less timber that goes into the ashes or the landfill. How do you see it tying all these things tying up? Yeah, how do we nudge the final consumers or the value chain itself to be sensitive to circular economy needs and sustainable behaviors?
Is that for me? Is that question for me? Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think we have to sort of take it one step at a time. And I think everyone is focusing on their unique sort of niche in terms of their product offering. So I think the first thing that I would say is just from a Kula perspective, we do have a specific niche, but part of our vision is to build a sustainable agricultural industry, and that can be sustainable. Sustainability can be defined in many different ways. It could be social equality. It could be environmental sustainability. It could be circular economy. So that's a very strong part of our sort of vision statement. And I think if we can build an ecosystem where we allow more people to interact, bring their offerings in, and to scale them up. And I'll make one specific example, is that most of these big commercial farmers, they actually get support from very sort of highly trained, well-experienced crop advisors in their areas. But there's only a limited number of these crop advisors. There's only, you could find 150, 200, 250 of these experts in the country. And it's very difficult to get access to these specific guys. So I think by using technology, we can actually make available more of these experts too, whether it's a commercial, whether it's an emerging, whether it's a small scale farmer. I think we just need to leverage the technology to even allow those guys to do more, because they're also frustrated. They also want to help more people, but there's only so many of them. So I think by using technology and bringing more people into the ecosystem, we can promote some of these concepts. We can promote best practices. We can promote not over fertilizing our soil. And those are the kind of things you get from experts. So that's something that we pushing. And I think if we can just help scale them up, make that one guy become 10. You know,
Matthew,
I think that's how we can, yeah.
Sorry, we are running out of time. Thank you so much
Right.
for this wonderful, exciting discussion which we just had. Thank you to the audience for tuning in and for engaging in this important conversations of our time. And thank you equally our audience for engaging us. We just have, above all, thank you for your time. I do not know how many afternoons we have, but let me say good afternoon. Thank you so much.